book is, as you said, it's titled The Darkside of Child Protection Services. Are You a Victim? And essentially what it does is, it, from an IO psychologist perspective, because that's my academic background, industrial organizational psychology. So what it does is it takes a critical look at an organization, and then through a methodical process, it analyzes the organization at various phases. So what it essentially does is shows that you can look at an organization, intrinsic components, and you'll find consistency in its external environment.
So basically, you're doing a psychological analysis on a business as if you would do it on a person.
That's exactly what an IO psychologist does.
Wow.
And that is fantastic, because that tells us something here that we can gather right here on this show.
We got a lot of psycho businesses in Connecticut, man, so that's this can be fun, actually.
So in perspective here, I know we're talking about some of the features and some historical things of the black male in particular. And we see this every day. You see this kind of thing going on in the streets where black males are targeted, and black males are causing themselves to be targeted by what goes in that arena, in that community. How do a brother really help another brother that's been dethroned, let down, and left out there to get it on its own, get what he needs?
Well, first of all, you have to understand the cycles that create social imbalances. And my master's level is in IO psychology, but the PhD I'm pursuing is in international psychology. So the patterns and things I see in New Haven or Hartford, I see in Australia, I see in the UK, I see in Rwanda. So I see the same tenets present. So essentially, there's usually 4 steps. The first step is identification. You're identified as a population of interest. The next step is targeting and ostracizing. And what they do there, they engage in what's known as epidemiological violence. And what that means is they'll take, when I say they, I mean the dominant culture, will take statistics that portray a population to be a certain way. For example, they may say 1 out of every 5 people of African descent or males of African descent is involved with the criminal justice system. But they don't speak about the social imbalances that contribute to that. So it brings about fear and hysteria based on epidemic, just based on statistics. The next layer is concentration. You start to promote social policies and things that trap certain people, that create potholes. When you can concentrate people, whether it's through public services, correctional institution, child protection services, etc., you're much able to manipulate large groups of people. And the last phase is annihilation and termination. And that's been the formula for hundreds of years.
And that seems to be the formula of taking over people too.
Exactly, because it's been an effective formula.
Yes. That one was used. That's what Hitler used, in fact.
That's exactly what Hitler did. Exactly.
So how do we, as men of color that are supposed to be responsible men, with this information, help the brother that's not educated to that point?
And it's not really about education. I mean, education does help. It's not about formal education. Let me say that. Education is important, but it doesn't have to come through a formal agency. You can educate yourself, because history has shown people of ostracized communities. If you're educated, that's actually a deficit. Gandhi was an attorney. Most people don't understand that, and look at his plight. Nelson Mandela was an attorney, and look at his plight. So education per se isn't the way to get where you need to be. It's actions. It's intelligent action. So first of all, you have to understand that you have to be able to engage in individualistic self-improvement. So that's individual empowerment. So once you feel that you have empowered yourself, whether through education or some other way of accomplishing, then now you take it to the community. Now you need communal accomplishment, and you can't be of the mindset of I'm waiting for someone else to do something for me. We as people who have been marginalized for a long period of time, have to begin taking our steps to move towards that strategic process of empowerment. So once you move past communal empowerment, then the last stage is economic empowerment. Until, a very astute gentleman once said to me, until you can feed them, you can't lead them. and that's a lot of people's hang-ups. And I think that's why a lot of people who are in privileged positions, such as working for the Department of Children and Families, they feel they have lower senses of psychological safety, and they fear that if they take steps to empower people who, their ethnic background, that's going to in some way offend the dominant culture, and now they'll be targeted. And that's a pivotal piece that goes with people who are in positions of authority, is that they have low levels of psychological safety.
Well, I would like to say I agree with that 100%, because I'm sure some of us in this room have definitely worked in institutions that fit exactly that description. But I'd like to take that further. Let's say you do have that fear, and it's like, to me, I call it the snitch syndrome. And I'm about to break this down to you right here. In the hood, police want you to squill on people, but if you do, they won't protect you. So therefore, you left up to whoever they want you to snitch on discretion to hurt you, right? And so that's the same kind of scenario in the workplace with a lot of these black males, is that if they snitch, they really don't have no protection after they now, I don't want to use the word snitch, after they disclose. Thank you, my brother. After they disclose, now they're left kind of vulnerable, and that's something I think that we need to focus in on, how to make them feel empowered within that invulnerable scenario, because I think once we get over that hill, then we could get something going, not only in the workplace but also in the community.
Yeah,
I believe most of that is about really knowing your rights.
Yeah, information and education.
Information and education, knowing your rights. I remember during the time of the Black Panthers, they walked the street with rifles on their shoulders with no bullets in it. A lot of us didn't know that they could do that, as long as they didn't have any bullets in the guns. And it was like overwhelming to a lot of black people in the community to see this on TV, to see these men walking down the street with rifles on their backs, and the police was not taking their guns from them. So that to us, wow, how they get away with that?
But they knew the rules.
But they knew, because they knew the law.
Yeah.
You see.
Oh, please.
Interject anytime, my brother.
Also, people have to understand from a historical perspective that when people speak up, it's not this concept of snitching, which is something that has come up culturally, I think, recently within my lifetime. If you say something, you're snitching. If you deny something, you allow it to continue. And so if you see injustice and don't say anything about it, that is a form of denial that gives power to your oppressor. So we have to understand that when we see other people objectified and marginalized and we don't say anything, we contribute to it. And we need to stop contributing to our own, workplace bullying and objectification by those in power. So I totally reject that whole snitching concept.
Yes, and to follow up what Brother Cornell said, in the book, The Darkside, I go over some of the strategies to use when you're faced with that. Essentially, what organizations do is, if you are part of the afflicted population, it's very difficult for you to talk about social injustices, but the dominant culture can speak about them. If you're a part of the afflicted population and you say, I'm being treated unfairly, what they do is what's known as the attribution theory. They say something is wrong with you, and they use the mindset that it's something that you're doing that's making the agency behave the way it's behaving. So essentially what has to happen is, I say to people, one thing, you have to journal what takes place. Don't rely on memory. And I have a very good memory, I don't rely on it. You journal consistently what happens. Things that may seem quite innocuous at this point in time.
Let me just say this real quick. Brothers out there, you should be taking notes right now.
Exactly. This is a gentleman that really is living proof that if you do things according to how he's putting it out there right now. It works. This is a brother proof, but very few people ask the question, you know, how were you able to go through such a thing in your life and everything turned out all right for you? I want to ask you a few questions now about your book, because you talk about burnout, particularly burnout of folks that work in protective service. And that is so important of what you said about burnout. Folks that do good work, you know, and do the best practice, and especially in social work, with things that work and then continually make things happen on a job and consider a good employee. How does that affect their personal life?
Well, what happens is that oftentimes organizational shortcomings are absorbed by individuals. So an organization which has a cumbersome work process, the individuals absorb that. And the more you try to manage that, what happens is you have what's known as emotional dissonance. That means your internal disposition has a disparate impact from your external. So you're trying to present that everything's okay, but internally things aren't okay. Your body isn't at homeostasis, at balance. So then what happens is you start to have relationship problems. You start to have family problems. Some people may begin to abuse substances. Your sleep is off. Your diet may change, and then you begin to have medical problems. And you can see this in an organization. From an IO psychologist perspective, one of the first things I do is first I look at the human rights of a nation or of a state agency, and I look at what those long-standing problems are. Then I look at the populations for patterns within the agency, and what you find is that people who are from the historically discriminated population, they're going to call out more. They're going to be consequenced at higher rates. So those patterns are objective and they exist within the organization. So it's sort of easy to sort of point those out. But part of the problem is people tend to think that they can manage them. What happens is you have within your body begins to produce higher levels of glucocorticoids, and what that does is that produces harmful toxins to your body, and that's where your medical problems come in.
Tell me now, is the effect different on female as it is on males, or is it the same?
It's the same. The complaints are different, so the symptoms are different, but the signs are fairly the same.
How about the effects?
The effects affect everyone. It just depends on your own personal disposition, you know, what your physical health is like. But it impacts everyone. The difference comes in is who the agency or organization has targeted. Who's the agency most significantly impacted? That population is going to have it worse. So if it's males, it's going to be males.
You talked about the emotional state, though, in your book, on how it affects female versus male. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, essentially, what I would say, you know, with regards to males or females, is that gets back to the societal, you know, aspects of things. Our society, this society here being the United States society, you know, we allow certain emotions to be expressed through females, and males are certainly, they need to suppress certain emotions, because then you get into the gender issues of how is a man to behave versus how is a female to behave. So it's not that it impacts you differently, it's that your gender role expectations are different, so you may have to suppress what you're feeling more. And as a male, if you express emotion because you're perceived as being capable of more physical violence, it's interpreted differently.
Okay, tell me now, why did you write this book? I'm just curious.
The book initially came about because prior to writing a book, in Child Protection Services, they have these cumbersome work processes which are based on a digital platform. So what I did was I took 4 or 5 years and I designed a digital platform that pretty much, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist now. Even the referendums that are out now trying to get a digital platform to do child protection services, it's probably decades ahead of that. So
when I was reading your book, your book was really decades ahead of anything I've ever read or even encountered.
So the book actually was cathartic for me, because all it started out was me journaling my experiences. So I said, well, I got to journal because, I'm having these emotional imbalances. So the book actually allowed me to manage my feelings. And I say, you know what? As I went around and start talking to different people, I start to see that, wait a minute, I'm not the only one. Because when you're going through an experience, organizations isolate you, so you feel like you're alone.
Yeah.
But once you start to talk to other people, you begin to see, wait a minute, this person went through this, that person went through this, and that's why I decided to follow up the book with a documentary, so that you don't necessarily need to listen to the author's perspective. Now you'll hear it and you'll also see it from a number of people who work within the field.
Yeah, you know what, Henry, what makes me sad is I listened to this gentleman, and he should be having this conversation with higher authorities in these systems, man. You should be doing seminars and trainings to the people of management and the supervisors, because people at the top in our system right now is completely oblivious to this whole scenario that you described.
Now you are working on your doctorate, or you have your doctorate?
I'm working on my doctorate.
Working on this doctorate at this time.
International psychology.
When I talk to this gentleman here, he should be somebody, like you said, in the higher authority that really deals with kids, and not only the kids but the community that the kids come from, because
Trickle down.
Right, because his knowledge about the behavior piece is really fundamentally sound here.
But one thing I have concluded, though, after talking to Carnell and him, is that you need a person that has Carnell's mindset, that's going to step up, and speak out. But he got to have his concept, technique, and doing his journal and everything. Balance, right, before he step up. So I just want to give, I don't know where Carnell went, but I want to give him credit on what he said about snitching also, and being bold and stepping up. But at the same time, it got to be a process behind that. And thank you for giving that to us today. And I hope the brothers out there and sisters took notes, because I think it benefits both sexes. I'm going to tell you now.
You tune in to WTRC 89.3 Hartford.
I want you to get your book and announce your name and your book over the air when you get it.
Eric Hundley, who just recently wrote a book, The Darkside,
Child Protection Services by Eric Hundley. I just had to get that in before.
We don't want you guys to go away. We want you to stick around, because we got a few other things that we're going to be talking about right after this PSA.
Yes, sir.